This is actor John Mcintire with his wife, actress Jeanette Nolan. John Mcintire was born June 27, 1907 in Spokane, Washington. Shortly after John's birth, the family moved to a ranch just south of a small town called Eureka, Montana. John's father was Brian Gene Mcintire. He was a practicing attorney and had once been a commissioner of Indian Affairs. He told his boys stories about the many Indian leaders that he had met. John had one older brother, Brian Gene Jr. Brian Jr. was born May 8, 1904. He was 3 years older than John. John and Brian was raised up on the family ranch. John grew up riding broncos, and at the age of 16, he actually won a national competition. When John finished high school, he enrolled at the University of Southern California, where he became interested in radio. His rich, deep voice was perfect for radio work. And on May 14, 1934, John landed his first radio part on a program that was called Tarzan and the Diamond of Asher. While Mcintire was performing on Tarzan, he met performer Jeanette Nolan, who had the second lead female role and had been in the role since the beginning. On the 26th of August, 1935, John Mcintire and Jeanette Nolan married, and will remain married for some 56 years until his death in 1991. They will be known as Hollywood's most loving and enduring couple. Jeanette was born December 30th, 1911 in Los Angeles. She was one of 3 kids that belonged to Edward and Ada Nolan. Edward was a union official and machinist, and Ada was a housewife. When Janet graduated from Abraham Lincoln High School, she enrolled at the Los Angeles City College. And at that same time, she had begun acting at the Pasadena Community Playhouse. And she was also working as a clerk at a department store. Being short of money, a classmate suggested that she should audition for a part on a local radio program, KHJ. They was looking for a female that could do a Scottish accent. Jeanette could not only do a Scottish accent, but she also could do Spanish, German, Russian, and Irish, which put her in great demand for radio work. She made her radio debut in 1932 on radio program Omar K. After her marriage to John Mcintire, the couple made a pact that they would go to the wilderness each year to get away from show business. And in 1935, the Mcintires headed back to John's home state, Montana. They bought a ranch cabin there 3 miles south of the Canadian border and 14 miles to the nearest mail drop. With no electricity and no running water, the Mcintires loved the wilderness life. John would hunt deer for food, and Jeanette would bake bread and churn butter, and one year she actually canned 500 jars of fruits and vegetables. Their cabin was similar to this one. They caught fish from their back porch. If they began running low of money, back to civilization they'd go and do radio shows, and of course later on, TV and movies. In 1940, John was in his first unaccredited drama film as the announcer of The Ramparts We Watched. And in 1941, while living in New York, John was playing the lead role in Phil Morgan in CBS's radio program Crime Doctor. Also in 1941, Jeanette was on the radio program Cavalcade of America. That same year, on July the 13th, the Mcintires had their first child, a daughter they named Holly. Holly was born in New York City. She grew up to be an actress, appearing many times with her parents. She was also in Peter Gunn, Combat, Perry Mason, and many other shows. 3 years after Holly was born, the Mcintires had a son, born 19 July 1944, Timothy John Mcintire. Tim will grow up to become a noted actor himself. He will also appear several times with his parents. When Tim was 21, his first film appearance was as Jimmy Stewart's son in Shenandoah in 1965. In 1977, Tim was in The Choir Boys. In 1978, he played as disc jockey Alan Freed in American Hot Wax. In 1980, he was in Brubaker. And in 1981, Tim played George Jones in the TV movie Stand By Your Man. In 1944, the year Tim was born, John was playing the lead role on the popular radio program The Adventures of Bill Lance. John played Bill Lance, a crime detective called in on hard-to-solve cases. It'll be 1948 before John Mcintire will be accredited in his first film role at the age of 40. He will appear in a Henry Hathaway film that will star James Stewart called Northside 777. It was based on a true story where a Chicago reporter proved that a man who had spent 11 years in the pen was innocent of killing a Chicago policeman. Also that same year in 1948, Jeanette Nolan was starring in her first film with Orson Welles in Macbeth. Jeanette played Lady Macbeth. In 1950, Jeanette was starred with Margaret Sullivan in Sullivan's last film role in No Sad Song for Me, about a woman dying from cancer. While Jeanette was in No Sad Song for Me, John was playing a no-nonsense police chief in The Asphalt Jungle that starred Sterling Hayden and Gene Hagen. That same year, John played Joe Lamont, a gambler in Winchester 73 with Jimmy Stewart. John and Jeanette played together as Jess and Ma Huggins in Saddle Tramp that starred Joel McCrea and Wanda Hendricks. The Mcintires had two homes, one in Laguna Beach and the ranch in Yak River Valley, Montana. They tried to spend 6 months at each place. In 1954, John will play the bad guy in The Far Country with Jimmy Stewart and Walter Brennan. And in 1955, John Mcintire gave one of his best performances as a reluctant attorney father of a crime-busting lawyer, based primarily on the crime-ridden city of Phoenix City, Alabama, called The Phoenix City Story, that starred Richard Kiley and Katharine Grant. In 1957, while Jeanette was appearing in April Love with Pat Boone and Shirley Jones, John was playing Dr. Joe McCord, a 72-year-old doctor, although he was only 50 at the time, with Anthony Perkins as sheriff in The 10 Star. Now this is Nolan with Ken Curtis, where she played as Festus's aunt on Gunsmoke. She made 8 appearances between 1957 and 1972. In 1958 and 59, John played as Lieutenant Daniel Muldoon in 25 episodes of the TV's Naked City. 1960 was a busy year for John Mcintire. He will play as the pa of Elvis Presley in Flaming Star. That year, producer and director Alfred Hitchcock directed one of his best-known thrillers, Psycho. Norman Bates was played by Anthony Perkins. Janet Leigh co-starred with Perkins, and John Mcintire played Sheriff Al Chambers, while his wife Jeanette was actually the voice of Norman Bates' mother. On the 5th of November 1960, Ward Bond, who played Wagon Master Major Seth Adams on CBS's top-rated TV show Wagon Train, passed away of a sudden massive heart attack. In March of 1961, John Mcintire joined the Wagon Train cast as Trailmaster Chris Hale. He first decided not to take it because he was afraid he couldn't spend his 6 months in Montana. He will continue on Wagon Train until 1965. Now here's John's daughter Holly. She played on 2 episodes with her father. While John was working on Wagon Train, his wife was playing as Nora Erison, the cafe owner in The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance with John Wayne. Jeanette Nolan, through her career, will appear in over 300 TV performances. In 1966, John and Jeanette and their son Tim appeared as farm workers on an episode of The Fugitive with Davy Jensen. The next year, in 1967, actor Charles Bickford, who played John Granger, owner of Shiloh Ranch on NBC's The Virginian, passed away on November the 9th, 1967, from pneumonia and blood infection at the age of 76. His death left the cast of The Virginian in shock. In order to replace Bickford, they had to find the right person. A mistake here could cost the show to be canceled. They hired the right man. John Mcintire became Clay Granger, brother of Charles Bickford's character. Jeanette Nolan will join the cast a few months later as Mrs. Clay Granger. They will continue on The Virginian until 1970. In 1975, John will be Judge Isaac Parker in Rooster Cogburn with John Wayne and Katharine Hepburn. On November the 5th, 1976, John will learn that his 72-year-old brother, Brian Gene Mcintire Jr., had passed away and was buried at the Golden Gate National Cemetery in San Bruno, California. In 1981, Jeanette will have a part in True Confessions with Robert De Niro and Robert Duvall. The movie is said to be loosely based on the Hollywood Black Dahlia murder. The next year, in 1982, Mcintire will become Grandpa in Honky Tonk Man with Clint Eastwood as a sick country music singer, closely emulating the life of the blue yodeler Jimmy Rogers. Cale Eastwood, Clint's son, played as his nephew. In 1984, Jeanette and John will play as sinister spies, posing as a harmless elderly couple in Cloak and Dagger. In 1986, the Mcintire family received devastating news that their son Tim had passed away at his home in Los Angeles from congestive heart failure on the 15th of April, 1986. Tim will leave behind his wife Margaret, his father and mother, and sister Holly. Timothy had struggled with alcoholism and drug problems for years, but he was considered a loving man, and he had established himself as an excellent actor. He'll be buried back home in Montana at the Tobacco Valley Cemetery in Eureka, where his family loved so much. Tim was 41 years old. 3 years after Tim's death, John will play his final role as Amos Reed in the comedy Turner and Hooch that starred Tom Hanks, a detective who had to adopt a dog of a dead man in order to find his murderer. Through the career of John Mcintire, he appeared in over 100 films and numerous radio and TV appearances. After his last appearance in Turner and Hooch, John was diagnosed with emphysema and lung cancer. After a long battle with illness, John Mcintire passed away on the 30th of January, 1991 at the St. Luke's Hospital in Pasadena. He was taken back to his beloved Montana and laid to rest close to his son Timothy at the Tobacco Valley Cemetery in Eureka. John Mcintire was 83 years old. After 56 years of marriage, his wife Jeanette Nolan and daughter Holly felt the deep loss of their husband and father because their family had been so close through so many years. In May of 1998, 7 years after John's passing, Jeanette will be in a cameo appearance as Tom Brooks' mother Ellen in The Horse Whisperer with Robert Redford. The Horse Whisperer was filmed in Jeanette's adopted state, Montana. Within a month of the release of The Horse Whisperer, Jeanette will suffer a severe stroke. 1 week later, the 4-time Emmy nominee will pass away on the 5th of June, 1998, at the Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. Jeanette will be taken back to Montana and laid to rest next to her beloved husband and son. Jeanette Nolan Mcintire was 86 years old.